So good evening, everyone. We're going to do our annual field day update, ideas, etc. This is going to be a little bit different than some of our talks because we actually have so much material and so many slides that this is going to be a piece of reference material for you. We'll of course post the PDF when we put up the video, but if you want the link tonight, tiny.cc/FD-2024, or you can shoot the QR code. I'll also have that at the end. That'll give you access to all the resources in the slideshow. Uh,
Wow.
and again, before we get started, Marty and I agree on this. There's one main piece of advice. If you're new to amateur radio and or field day, consider finding a local group and doing your field day in doing your I'm sorry, find a local group doing field day in your area and ask to join them. And there's a number of ways you can find that. You can use the ARRL Field Day Station Locator, which we'll be demonstrating a little bit later. You can search on the ARRL for affiliated clubs or QRZ for clubs in your area. And this is a great way to take advantage of the learning opportunity as Field Day if you're new and just starting out.
Absolutely.
Let me see if we have one more before we get started. Well, yeah, about this slideshow. It's accumulation of 4 years of presentation. It's a collection of resources for you to read through after our talk. We will be skipping through many of the slides and entire sections during our talk. The next slide has links to various topics for this. These are all links, so when you go to this slideshow, if you're interested in antenna options, you could just jump to that slide section by clicking on these links. So these are all hyperlinks to the materials in the slideshow. Okay, I'll let Marty go ahead and introduce himself and talk a little bit.
Hey, I am Marty Woll in 6 Victor, India, and I'm not sure how many field days I've been. It's probably over 50. But I started out with a young group of young hams, all teenagers, no adults in the club, but we went out and did field day 4A very seriously every year, and 6 out of 7 years we were the top 4A in the country. Our numbers include several people now in the CQ Contest Hall of Fame, so it was a wonderful start for those of us who enjoy the competitive side of field day. And as you'll hear this evening, of course, there are many ways to enjoy field day. There are some people that use it primarily as an outreach event. There are some who want to simply experiment with new antennas and so on, or a new location. And there are others who return regularly to a certain spot and really ramp up the effort to get the highest score they can. The nice thing is, at least since the 80s, the rules have not changed that much, other than some bonuses that have come into effect. So you can compare your results one year to the next, get an idea of what bands were the most effective. I mean, for example, this year, the effort we have in putting up a good 80-meter antenna may not be worth it, just because last year, even with a good high dipole, we worked so few people on 80 meters, primarily CW, that we may just rely on 40. And also the band is going to be probably noisier than last year. All the optimum frequencies are moving up as we hit the peak of the solar cycle. So we expect that 10 will be busier than last year. 15 and 20 have always been busy. 20 will probably be better later at night than it has been, and 40 we expect is a good all 24-hour band. So we may be able to keep people busy if we just have a couple of transmitters that we may not get down to 80 meters.
So Marty, we have 53% of the people that are here tonight have done field day from 20 or more years. About 25% have done it 11 to 20 years, and the remaining people have done it between 2 to 5 and 6 to 10. This will be my 43rd field day this year.
Very good. Well, as I said, there are many different objectives, but to me, one of the most important ones, we've won field day enough times that the competition is fun, but to me, the real benefit is getting hams who are new to HF or have not experienced HF too much, and get them out to actually sit in front of a radio perhaps with usually with a mentor, with some training, and let them experience it for themselves. For those who are involved in public service communication, this is a chance, unlike your normal nets where you have the same folks checking in every week. Here you've got call signs that are unfamiliar that you need to hear, get down accurately, and respond. It's great communication skills training. And it's, the format isn't too difficult. You're getting somebody's basically entry category and an ARRL section or RAC section. Um, and so it's somewhat predictable, but at the same time, you need to listen carefully to what's being sent, and again, get it down accurately. And to me, that is a core skill that everybody needs to build up. And this is a really great way to do it. And I think, especially some of the newer folks, they'll find that it may be very daunting at first, but the longer they go, the better they're going to get at it. And I'll bet by the end of field day, they're going to realize they can do this a lot better than they thought they could.
And one thing I think that's really interesting, if you get practice with exchanges in a contest, you're working mainly with people who are used to it. But when you do it with field day, you're going to get a wide mix of people who have a lot of experience and very little experience. So it's a great opportunity to try and copy that exchange from a wide variety of stations.
Yeah.
Fortunately, this year there's not many changes, so we'll just go through the changes real quick here. There's three main changes, and they all have to do with bonus points. So there's no changes in operation. It only has to do with bonus points. Public location criteria is changed. There's some new bonus points available for some of the classes, and there's some changes, or actually clarifications, in the GOTA scoring. So the public change is here. You can read the whole thing, but the whole thing is they really want the station to not only be on display to the public, but also engage the public. So engaging visitors is one of the things they've added to this. The second one is just talks about field day bonuses and some of the changes that are there. The main one is this idea of having a 50-point bonus by having a person to ensure that the field day site is free of hazards. So this is along with the safety officer that was available as a bonus before. And the final change has to do with GOTA bonus, and it just clarifies that the GOTA bonus points are not multiplied by the power multiplier. And we'll talk about the power multiplier a little bit later, but that just means that what power you're running your main station at, the GOTA station's power can be different because there's no multiplier involved with it.
Let me jump in with a quick answer to a question Tom asked about, why the so-called advantage for setting up, not setting up ahead of time, is 3 hours that everybody else is shut down. It used to be, I think, long ago, that there were a lot of stations that wanted to just try and set up at the end, or, right at the beginning of the event. And I don't think as many stations do that anymore. Usually if you're hiking up a mountain and you're not going to have a lot of setup time, that may be workable. Or if you're rolling up in your comm van and everything is ready to go. But most stations don't do that. And I suspect, as I recall, many years ago, there were more stations on in those last 3 hours than there are today. So I think it's a kind of an artifact of a much earlier time when conditions were a little bit different. So frankly, I don't think, unless you want just to see how long it takes you to get set up, how fast you can do it, I see no advantage in setting up starting the 0 hour. And in fact, I think it's a disadvantage because in addition to training newer ops, people who aren't familiar with field operations in the actual operating, the copying and the receiving and the sending, you also want them to get familiar under some supervision with how to set up a station in the field, the safety procedures, and so on. And you can't do that if everybody's trying to get on as fast as they can. So that setup time is also a training and learning opportunity that I think everybody should try and take advantage of.
I agree, and I think you'll also find that people will even question whether you're trying to make contacts. They'll remind you that the field day's over, even though you do have the right to do that. You're sort of butting your head against the wall. Now, there were a few changes last year, so if you missed the changes from last year, just real quickly, they really increased the amount of points available for the GOTA station last year in 2023. They changed the low power setting from 150 watts to 100 watts. They prohibited multi-channel streaming and automated operations, mainly with digital modes, but I guess you could do it with some other things also. And there were some changes in the RAC section names. So we'll go.
Particularly around Ontario.
Yes, Ontario went from GAT Greater Ontario GTA Greater Ontario Area to the Golden Horseshoe. So traditionally, field day is often the first exposure for a new ham to HF operations, and that's why we really want to stress that if you're not doing field day, or if you know people out there that are new, try and get them out for field day, because it's a little bit different style than operating on the local repeater, the local net. And then there's always the question, is it a contest or a test of emergency communications? And I
Yes.
yes, exactly. The answer is yes to both of those. I like the answer from Stan K4SBZ. It's a demonstration of ECOM. In other words, it's a PR event to demonstrate to the public what we can do, not only for ECOM, but other activities of ham radio. So it's not a contest, but it can be a friendly competition. It's a great training opportunity, a chance to demonstrate amateur radio to the public, a chance to try new modes. Last 2 years ago, I had 3 people that tried FT8 for the first time, and then they were hooked and they wanted to be on the air with FT8 the next week, including one of our original charter members of our club. It's a great chance to meet new fellow hams and a chance to renew acquaintances. I'll let you go ahead, Marty.
Yeah. Um, the ARRL puts out a field day packet every year, and they kind of remind you of the various emphases you or your club can put on field day. And again, it's not the same for everybody, but the important thing is it's supposed to be enjoyable, and you got to have fun whatever you're doing, whether it's mainly talking to the public or putting the headphones on and copying weak stations, or if you're going to use it as practice for a real emergency situation. I know we've gotten some additional equipment and new field antennas and so on. We said this is a good chance to try them out. We'll get to use them, and don't just leave them in a package or a box. Let's get them up there and see what it takes. And usually you'll find there's some little bit of learning curve on almost any new piece of equipment or any new antenna. And the time to figure that out is when you're setting up for field day and operating, and not when something happens where you absolutely have to use it.
The other 2 things we want to stress is being flexible is very important, because you don't know what the conditions are going to be each year. That's one thing that I've found over the years is we can have great plans and then we can get weather that doesn't match the plans. The band conditions might not match the plans. We could have another CMT come and give us a solar flare. The other thing that's very important too is the follow safety rules, and we'll talk a lot about safety in the upcoming slides here. So as far as planning goes, I put together a short little thing here. Basically, probably one of the most important things you do is line up who's going to participate. And I know people in the club are dreading the phone call from me, because I tell them if they don't submit the form that they want to participate, they will be getting a phone call from me. So it's also the time when I make sure everyone's email address and phone numbers are correct in the club. You need to pick a class and a number of stations you want to operate, and we'll talk more about that later. You need to get equipment and schedule the operators. Now, setting up the antennas can vary considerably depending on your operation, your style of operation, how big of operation you have, what part of the country you're in. A beam is a lot more difficult to use in the middle of the country than it is from either coast, because you're constantly spinning it back and forth. Whereas Marty can just point it one direction and forget about it.
Everything goes 70 degrees here.
See, if
And
we do that, we are constantly turning it three ways from here. So beams are not that great to have here. This is a link that brings a document that I put together originally for Field Day 2020 when most of the our hams in our local club were doing Field Day on their own. And they said, what can we do for antennas? So I put together this thing. It was originally called Portable Antennas. And it talks about different types of antennas, wire, verticals, beams, etc. And then it has a section on each of the different types of antennas with resources, YouTube videos, how-tos, and even some commercial versions of some of these antennas. So just a guide that you can look through and get some ideas on antennas, not just for field day, but for any operation. And we've done a number of things on antennas in the past for RATPAC.
Yeah, the thing to remember, I think, if you're trying to make a decision between, high gain complex and low gain simple, is that everything radiates and you will make contacts, whichever way you go. It may be more of a slog in some cases if you have a very simple or very low antenna, but the putting up the bigger stuff, which we've done plenty of over the years, multiple Yagis and everything else. It takes time and it takes effort and manpower. And if those are in kind of short supply, don't get so ambitious that you wear everybody out before field day starts.
And your shelter is going to be different depending on what part of the country you're in. Some places can get away with a small rain tarp and just be fine. Other places might need a heated trailer. So it depends where you're at, what you're going to want, and what's available to use for your club. There is an interesting piece of equipment that's in this picture that you might not realize you want to have, but it's very helpful to have a step ladder at your field day, not necessarily to put up antennas, but for doing things that happen above your head so people aren't climbing up on things that they shouldn't. Generator is one way you can do power, but you can also do batteries with power. You can also use batteries as power. You can even use commercial mains as power. It just puts you in a different category. We'll talk about those later.
Especially with the advances in batteries over the last few years, no longer do you have to love 2 tons of batteries to keep your equipment going all year, all 24 hours. My typical setup when I'm participating with our ACS group is my K3, and I have a 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery that'll run that about the whole weekend. So I have a spare in case it runs low, but for the most part, I'm doing a lot of transmitting and so on, and that thing will just run the radio. One battery will run the radio all weekend.
And you're going to need some time to set up your stations. Remember that. And then probably the most important thing about field day, or one of the most important things, is to operate. I've seen clubs that put a lot of effort into setting up and then no one is there operating. And it's extremely frustrating. I always tell, when I'm chairman, as I am this year for our local club, I said my goal is that at least one station must be on all 24 hours, and hopefully all the stations are on for 24 hours, but I don't want to see empty stations. So that's one of the things that might be a goal that you can think about. In addition to making contacts, there's also bonus points to be had, and we'll go through the list a little bit later, but this is just the list. Things such as emergency power, and some things even before field day, such as publicity, public location selection, etc. Make sure you plan to be able to tear down and install your equipment. Make sure you have enough people still left at the site.
Yeah, when I do our field day poll to see who's participating on our ACS group, I have 5 columns who can operate, Saturday daytime, Saturday night, Sunday morning, who can help set up ahead and who can help demobilize at the end. And surprisingly, I get probably more people who say they can help set up or tear down than who actually want to sit and operate. So we try and spread that out. But having, making sure they understand that there's work at the beginning and work at the end, that's all part of the training.
And make sure you submit a log. I mean, you put all the work into it, you might as well submit a log, and you're going to want to do it electronically, no matter how you're keeping your logs, but you're going to want to submit your entry. It's different than submitting a log to a contest. You're not sending in the same sort of things, although you can, but there is a form you must fill out with to take care of all the bonus points and things. So we've mentioned already field day classes, and we've talked about the number of transmitters. So basically, there's a decision to be made as to which class you're going to operate in. We'll go through each of the classes individually here. They're A through F, and each of those has options of having a different number of transmitters that you're operating. So the stations are also based on the class you choose and how many stations you're operating. So Class A is non-club or club portable operation with 3 or more persons. So it really comes down to this key right here, 3 or more people for Class A. And portable. You must not use facilities installed for permanent station use or any structures installed permanently for field day. All club equipment has to be within a 1,000-foot circle. And you can use a square too if you like, that's fine. But it has to be within 1,000 foot. And this is the class that was typically used by most stations. Now with the COVID situation we've had over the last couple of years, this has actually there's been less Class A. It's coming back again now, but Class A was predominantly the one. There were some changes in 2023. Just a reminder that the power level is now maximum 500 watts on any power level and 100 watts for low power. Class B does not mean battery. Class B actually means 1 or 2 people portable. They could be a club, they can be an individual, they could be 2 strangers that met, but it's 1 or 2 people, and also a maximum of 2 radios on the air at the time. So you can't have a 3B station, for example, or a 4B station. You can only have a 1B or 2B station. Most of the provisions are the same as Class A. Now, even though the B doesn't stand for battery, that doesn't mean you can't use batteries as your power, but you can also use emergency power such as generator or commercial power. And even though you don't give this out in your exchange when you're actually saying it, you either say 1B or 2B. When they list the results, you'll see the results listed this way. One operator with 1 radio emergency power. 1 operator with, 2 operators with 1 radio emergency power. 1 operator operating 2 radios. This is what I operate when I operate portable myself, 2-1B, 1, and so forth. So each of these are all Class B, but there's only really 2 exchanges you'll hear on the A, 1B or 2B. But you're competing against different people in the listings. Class C is mobile. And for it to be a mobile station, it must be capable of operating while in motion, but you don't need to be in motion during field day. But you can't set up a tower next to your car and be a 1C because you can, of course, drive away with that tower and still operate. It could also be maritime, aeronautic, bicycle, mobile. It doesn't have to be a car. But it doesn't have to be moving, but it has to be capable of moving. If you're interested in mobile operations, I have a bunch of links here. We won't go through these, but these links give you a lot of good information on setting up a mobile operation. Now, this was something that people thought about doing during the pandemic. They said, we'll take 5 vehicles, we'll park them all next to each other, and we'll be 5C. No, your C category can only be 1 vehicle. Now it could be 2C if you have 2 radios operating on the same vehicle, or if it's a boat and you have 12 radios on the boat, you can do that, but it can't be 12 boats. It has to be 1 vehicle. Now, if you do this, park vehicles and use a stationary antenna, you're Class A or Class B, depending on how many. You're not Class C because you can't drive with that. This is also not Class C because you can't operate when the tower is pushed up or the mast is pushed up. And I'm going to skip over a couple of these. Now, Class D used to be only allowed to make contacts with A, B, and C stations. They could not make contact with another D station. But they changed that rule for the pandemic, and each year since then, they've kept that rule. So Class D stations can work any one. So any station can work any one for field day under the current rules. Class E, I'm sorry, I forgot to explain through with D is when you're operating from your home station with commercial power. If you're operating from a home station or a club station that's a physical structure and you use emergency power, then you're Class E as opposed to Class D. So the only difference between Class E and Class D is the type of power you're using. Class F is a special class. It requires that you're involved with an emergency operations center. And you can't just designate yourself an emergency operations center, so we won't talk much about F. If you're going to be operating F, you already know that you're going to be an F station, and you have to be working with an EOC
But be
site.
prepared to copy some of those exchanges because
Yes.
there will be EOCs activated.
Yeah, so you can work anyone, and you want to copy all those. There is no distributed joint station operation, so you can't set up 5 locations and then pull it all together. They do, though, list an aggregated score, but it's not for the station score. It's just an aggregated club score. I'm going to skip all of these for now. And again, this is one of the things that's important. I'll let Marty talk a little bit about this. We've had some questions on this, but the problem is when you're operating from home with one station, you don't have to worry about interfering with yourself. But once you bring another radio into the picture, you have to worry about interference.
Yeah, and part of the solution for this is in your planning. Let's say you're going to have 3 simultaneous transmitters. I remember visiting one field day back when I was vice director and used to make the rounds, and they were all complaining about interstation interference. And even though they were spread out, very great distances. And the first station, the first of their stations, what are you doing? Well, I'm on 20-meter sideband. And I went to the next one. What are you doing? Well, I'm on 20-meter CW. I went to the third one where I'm on 20-meter digital. And I kind of think I know what their problem is. Obviously, if you can separate bands, that's good. Now, there are some very good commercial filters out there that will, pass one band and reject the others. I strongly advise those because, a receiver can get blown, especially, solid state front end can get blown out if there's a loud enough signal, even if it's not on the same band as you're tuned to. So, discrete filters are one thing you can do. You can also build stub filters. Now, RATPAC has a talk that I gave back quite some time ago with you can find it in the archives on minimizing interstation interference. And we have a whole bunch of tips there. But in the planning side, you can, look at locating your stations so that they're not in each other's antenna pattern. If you're going to have dipoles, if you can have one over here and one over here like this, as opposed to putting them front to back where their beam, the lobe is right into the other antenna. So if you can physically separate them, put them in the nulls of the other station, that will inherently reduce the total amount of RF you have to deal with. The other thing is using good, clean transmitters. Some of the little compact radios, the ICOM 706, some of those old things, they're fine for a single op, but usually they're not very robust. If you start working up to, like K3, K4, some of the high-end radios, even though they're maybe more difficult, the aircrafts are easy to move around because they're only 8 pounds, but there's some very good radios that are kind of desktop type. But using those, they're going to be cleaner on the transmit side, which means they're putting less junk out to the other stations, and they're more robust on the receive side, which means they are better equipped to deal with loud signals on other bands. And you combine that with either discrete filters or stub filters, and boy, you've got, you should, especially when you're running 100 watts. I mean, we had to deal with this on all our DXpeditions where everybody's running, 500 to 1,000 watts or more. and it becomes much more challenging. We figure it out. But with a 100-watt class, it should be no problem if you just observe a few good some good antenna planning, station location planning, and good radios, and a reasonable amount of filtering if you need it.
Now, unfortunately, one of the most popular radios out there right now is probably one of the worst choices as far as new radios that are available, and that's the ICOM 7300. It has a very bad reputation for use in the vicinity of other radios, so you may want to consider that. And also, you may want to, try a multiple radio operation before field day so you have an idea of what it's like. We don't think that we're going to get interference because we're not used to having another radio close by. So you may want to consider that. And if you don't have any experience, a good group of people to ask are your local contesting people or your de-expedition type of people, because they deal with this with kilowatts, as Marty said, as opposed to the 100 watts we're typically dealing with. Now, in addition to the station classes we talked about before, Class A or Class F stations can run 2 extra stations. Now, Class B, C, D cannot, but Class A or F stations can run a VHF UHF station, and it doesn't count towards your number of total transmitters on the air, and a GOTA or Get on the Air station, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. So let's talk about the free VHF UHF station. All Class A entries may also operate one additional transmitter without it counting towards their total number if it operates exclusively on bands 50 megahertz and higher. So 2 meters, 6 meters, 440, 1.2 gigahertz, all of those do not change your classification by running one or more VHF station. It does not, though, count towards the bonus of 100 point for an additional station. So you don't get an extra station, but it doesn't count against your total number of stations. The GOTA station or Get on the Air station is available. You can have one GOTA station when you have Class A2 or more. And the idea of the GOTA station is to get new hams or inactive hams on the air.
Or non-hams.
Yes, or non-hams also. But you're only allowed to have one GOTA station. So if you decide you want to do a GOTA station, you can't have 2 GOTA stations. You can only have one. And they changed it in 2023. There used to be a limit on how many contacts you can make with a GOTA station. There's now no limit on the number of contacts you can make. All GOTA station contacts are worth 5 points regardless of mode or power level. In addition, bonus points may be also earned by the station under the rules for GOTA stations. The GOTA station has to use a different call sign than you're using for your field day site. So we're going to be W8VPV, which is the club's call sign. We will use one other ham's call sign for the GOTA station. It'll be completely different call sign. So it should be a different call sign.
And the advantage of that is that that GOTA station can work anybody, including stations that have been already worked by the main station on a given band.
Absolutely. Now, please, though, your GOTA station has to keep the same call sign throughout the field day. You can't have 12 different GOTA call signs during the field day when different operators step up to the microphone or the key.
And it's very important that you have an experienced and knowledgeable control operator there, so that A, they can keep the station legal, and B, they can provide some coaching and a real-time feedback for the folks who are visiting. And some especially say you have a reporter who wants to see what's going on, you can sit them down, or a visiting elected official.
We got the mayor on there.
Have them make contact, and boy, that can really light them up. But one of the nice tools that we have sometimes is you use what's called a point script. You'll have, CQ field day W6XYZ on one line, and you could, big print, you could point them to that and then say, Roger, 2 Alpha Nebraska. Okay. And you can point them to that. You point them what to say next. So
Yes.
They have a script in front of them, and eventually they won't need to refer to it.
And when you write it out, make sure you put the phonetics on there. So don't just put, K8ZT, put Kilo 8 Zulu Tango right there, so they're reading it the way they need to read it. So here's the rules who can work the GOTA station. Now, the person managing or helping them can be anyone, but the person actually making the contacts is a person that's licensed since the previous field day, a generally inactive licensee, someone who's not been on the air for a while, non-licensed persons under direct supervision of an appropriate control operator. You do need to make a list of all operators and participants who were involved with your GOTA station. That's part of your entry to the ARRLs on the summary sheet. So have a login sheet there so people can log in. Station must have a valid control operator, and non-licensed participants working under the direction of a valid control operator can only work W stations or VE stations to avoid issues with third-party traffic. But that's pretty much who you're going to be working on field day anyway. And we'll skip over that and that. Oh, you can't have your person that's being the helper do the logging. So if you need someone to log in addition to the GOTA person, get another person to sit down who's a GOTA participant and do logging for them. So you can't perform the logging functions or make the contacts as the non-GOTA person, as the what I'm going to refer to as the GOTA coach. Now, before we go too far, we need to remember that safety is extremely important. There are unfortunately accidents every year that happen, sometimes even fatal accidents. The two most common problems at field day are a person coming in contact with electrical material either by touching it with an antenna or a bad installation of AC circuits from a generator. One of the other problems is falling, either falling from something or having something fall on you. And the third one is
tripping over a tent stake or
yes,
unmarked line.
yes. And then the other one is dealing with carbon monoxide and gasoline if you're using a gas-powered generator. So be aware of those. This is a link on the ARRL safety checklist. When you go out there, it'll give you the PDF. This is the old one. The new one's in the packet, so you'll get it. But this talks about all the things you need to do for safety purposes, and they've actually increased it a little bit. So I'll change that link and make it point to the right one.
And just like in the incident command system, when you got somebody there, there should always be a safety officer, and you should have a safety briefing, especially when you're starting to install things or you're uninstalling things. Make sure you have a safety briefing. For example, we operate up on a helipad, and it's a pretty long drop off down to the street. So we not only have barrier tape, but we have lights, and we remind people to stay clear of that barrier area because in the dark they could easily trip. Also, when you're stringing out antennas, make sure that people aren't walking backwards because they can't see the hazards behind them.
And also remember, because if you're doing it in a public place or you have any guests, you also need to assure their safety. So don't rush, don't cut corners, don't go near overhead wiring. Be careful with generators. So the Class B, you can't use you can use your residence, but you can't use your ham station. So if you live on 40 acres and you want to go out to the way back on the 30th acre away from your house and not use any of your existing structure, that's fine. But this has always been a question. My sort of rule is if you're going to do something like this, you need to be able to pack everything up in your vehicle, drive to the location, even if it's on your same property or across the street from you or whatever it is, and have nothing from your actual station that you're using. So if you are operating Class B when you only have one or two people to operate, sometimes installing equipment, carrying everything out can be very difficult. So if you have a Go box that's ready to go, just means you need to get your antenna up, plug it into your Go box, and you're all ready to go. So when I operate my 2 Bravo, I'm using my Go box, and I have a whole presentation on portable operations and Go boxes that you can go to. And it's a rather lengthy one. I did this for RATPAC a couple weeks ago. You can go listen to it there or watch the video. You can also have a Class B station that's vehicle-based. You might even have your radio installed in your vehicle, but by putting up an antenna instead of trying to use a mobile antenna, you can get a much better signal, but you will be Class B instead of Class C. I'm going to skip over all this. You can read through all this about, if you're interested in Class B operation, I have a bunch of information here about what I've done over the many, many years that I've done Class B. If you're going to be operating from home and you don't have a station there already, or you have a homeowner's problems where you can't put up a permanent antenna, you can use temporary antennas, you can use balcony antennas, you can use portable satellite antennas. Working FT8, FT4 is very effective with some of these compromise antennas, such as a magnetic loop. For technician class, if you're operating by yourself and you don't have a control operator that means you can operate on other bands, you are limited to 10-meter single sideband, 6-meter, 2-meter, and only CW on 80, 40, 15. Remember, you cannot operate FT8 on these bands as a technician. You can operate FT8 on 10 meters. You can operate FT8 on VHF. You can only operate single sideband on 28.3 to 28.5. So if you are going to be operating as a technician, you have to fall within these constraints. So be aware of that. And I have a whole presentation on the things you can do with a technician class license that'll help you plan for field day.
Let me just throw on, you've been talking about radio classes of entry. I would say, don't let the class of entry dictate how much fun you are or aren't going to have. Pick what's going to give you the most activity and the most enjoyment, and then just pick the class that fits. Unless you're planning to show up at the top of the listings, it doesn't matter whether, what category you're in. The idea is to go and have some fun and learn something.
I would say if you're a technician and you have a radio that can operate 10 meters, there'll be some activity on single sideband, but I can even guarantee more that there'll be activity on FT8 also. So by being able to do FT8 and single sideband on 10 meters, it increases your chances of making contact on a band that should be open this couple years, but it may not be. We never know. And then we're in a good year, so it probably will be. We're going to clip down to okay. We already mentioned before, emergency power option could include a generator. It could be a standalone generator, or it could be the vehicle-based battery system. You can use that also. Solar power, batteries, as long as they're charged before field day, or you can charge them with emergency power sources other than generators on the site, such as solar. Matter of fact, if you're going to use solar power, you're probably going to need to use a battery in your system anyway. There is the potential that you could operate strictly on solar, but of course you wouldn't be able to operate at night. And one of the problems is, even if the sun's out, there's clouds that pass over it, and you can notice a very big drop. So I don't know of anyone that goes out and operates just solar. It's solar and a battery combination. Now, there are other alternative power, but if you've never tried these before, don't wait till field day to try it, or bring it with other batteries, with other sources of power. Hand crank sounds really great until you sit there and pedal it for a while and realize how quickly you get exhausted without putting out much power. So these are all information on generators. This is information on battery power.
And again, all these links are going to be in the PDF that goes
Yes.
up in a couple of days, so you'll be able to click and do as deep a dive as you want to.
This was a RATPAC presentation we had from a couple years ago talking about solar generators. Remember, solar generators are not generators. They're simply big battery packs designed to be charged by solar panels or other means.
And they have an inverter to put AC out.
Yes. And if you're operating with emergency power, you don't have to operate your computer on emergency power unless you're using it to be able to make the contacts. So if you're just using your computer and you're operating single sideband and all you're using the computer for is the log, you could actually use commercial power and still get the emergency power bonus. But if you're using it to do FT8, the computer is part of the contact, so it has to be battery powered. So I suggest something like this battery pack here. This runs my laptop for an entire week. It's as big as a textbook, puts out 20 volts, and between that and the battery in the laptop, I can get a whole weekend's worth of time out of that.
Yeah.
You can also use one
And
of
when you're
these.
selecting, I have one really nice old laptop that's got a nice big bright screen that makes it really easy to see even the daytime. The problem is it's a power hog. And if I try to run that off a battery, it'll run the battery down in a few hours. So think about and understand what the current drain is on each piece of equipment you plan to hook up to that battery, so you can size your battery bank or your plan on swapping out appropriately.
And a couple tips on computer battery use. There's a lot of things you can do, like turning down the brightness, turning off all the unnecessary things. Like if you're not going to be using Wi-Fi, turn the Wi-Fi off, turn the Bluetooth off. Uh, go into your settings and adjust for power savings as opposed to performance. So there's a lot of things you can do to make it much better. So you need to log your contacts. And for years, the only way for people to do it was with paper. And some small operations still do it that way, but I'm one of these people that actually went out and learned how to use computers so I could actually log stuff on my radio. So I'm very much a computer logger. If you are going to use computers to log with, the next step is to interface your radio, and that makes the computer logging much more effective because it will record the band, frequency, time, all and mode all automatically without you having to worry about it. So if you interface your radio with your computer logging software, and this is from Bob, N6 TV, even if you aren't operating field day, this is a great article and you got to go read it because he talks about everything you need to know about USB and serial interfaces to interface your radio to your computer.
Bob was our secret weapon novice back in the old West Valley Club that I mentioned earlier. He was a novice that did 45 words a minute, and he's still he's a super CW operator, and he is in the CQ Contest Hall of Fame. So we popped him on the novice station back when they had them, and boy, he racked up the contacts. But Bob is he's a data engineer, and he some of you may be familiar with the reverse beacon networks. Whenever we deploy those, you send them out to some part of the world, and that includes a little small computer like a Red Pitaya or something like that. There are always configuration issues. Bob is on the phone or on email with them almost all the time when they need help. So he's a resource all around the world, and not just in the articles he writes, but a very, very reliable source.
And I asked them a question on Thursday when I saw them at Contest University because I had a question about Windows 11. So contest logging software, probably the two most likely ones you're going to be using are N1MM or N3FJP. There are still some clubs that use WriteLog, some clubs still use TR, some other things out there, but the most common two things you're going to bump into. If you are working with a group, find out what they're using and practice with it before field day. And one of the ways I suggest you learn the software is load the software, tune the radio during a contest to a station that's running, and pretend you're logging as them. That way you don't have to worry about the radio. You can concentrate on learning the software. Once you do that for a while, you'll be comfortable with the software, and then you can actually be on the radio and use the software at the same time.
And if you have multiple stations where one or two people only are going to be at each station and they're not going to be swapping around, you don't have to use the same program at every station, because ultimately they all output the list of contacts by band, which is really all you need to submit. You're not submitting a Cabrillo log like you would be in a contest. So in my case, I have a couple of little netbooks that have WriteLog on them, and I set them up for the folks, and I would make a little cheat sheet so they know how to do the basic stuff, like go back and correct an entry if they have to. And then for me, I'm familiar with WinTest because we use it in all the DX contests that we in the overseas contests that we do. So my computer is set up for that one. So the operator who's going to join me, they learn that one. So pick whatever you've got. You don't, it's nice if everybody's using the same one, but it's not essential.
And this link will take you out to the contesting software. And I did a presentation on contest logging software for RATPAC about a year ago. The other thing about the logging software is if you're doing just FT8 and FT4, you can just use the log from WSJTX, and you can import that into other programs. So you might not even need a logging program for some of your stations. It's just some information about N1MM with some resources out there. There's a
Got
bunch
about
of resources.
5 or 6 minutes left
Okay.
here.
And resources for N3FJP. We're going to skip over some of these bonus points. Basically, take a look at the bonus point list, check which category you're running in, and see which bonus points you can get, and decide whether you want to devote the time to getting those bonus points. It's always helpful if you have multiple people in your group, assign someone to make sure that they take care of those bonus points if you really want to get them. Publicity is very important. We already stated that's one of the reasons. So think about social media ahead of time. Before, it was always the idea of sending an article into the local newspaper and they publish it. Kind of hard to get done now, but you can still use a number of social media resources to spread the word. Having an educational activity at your site for visitors gets you extra bonus points. And I have an article with ideas on doing this that I wrote for the Ohio Section Journal, so you can go out here. It's designed for youth, but it works for anyone. It talks about things you can do. It also has a bunch of handouts you're welcome to have and share with the education purposes. I'm going to skip over those. This again is a bunch of things. You can print these posters out, laminate them. They have QR codes so you can share them with your visitors, and they can take these home. You don't have to worry about how many you're going to print, worry about copies of paper out in the rain. And these are the kind of resources you can use to increase publicity. The Field Day Submission Tool is an online tool to submit all your information.
And you get extra points for using it.
Yes. Think about doing a field day prep activity. Maybe the ARRL digital contest coming up this weekend, next weekend, or the ARRL June VHF UHF contest the weekend after that. I did a presentation on how to get involved with that last week, 2 weeks ago for RATPAC. The phone fray every Tuesday evening, CW Ops on Wednesday. These are all great chances to train people, to try out your equipment, to try out your logging software, etc. There's also some state QSO parties that you can still jump into. The Kentucky party and the West Virginia party are still out there. So those are all things you can do to warm up.
Yeah, and Dave reminds us, Dave New reminds us that this weekend is the CQWPX CW contest, where multipliers are prefixes, so everybody works everybody, and it's a 48-hour event. So if you have got some CW operators and they want to practice, this is a great weekend to do it.
And you can do a POTA operation. Our local club is doing a POTA operation next weekend as our practice run. And you can also double dip. If you're going to operate from your field day from a park, you can get parks on the air credit for it. Remember, you do not need to give the park with each exchange. So just operating from a park and submitting your log to both ARRL and to the POTA website will get people credit for the park. Here's the field day locator. When you click on the link, it'll take you out to it. You can find stations in your area, and you can add your own station to the group. Let me go over here to Ohio. I zoomed in too soon. Fortunately, once you get in your area, it works well, but you got to get in your area. So this is my area in Ohio, and you can see right here, I posted our field day site for our local club. And when you do that, it'll put it has you put in your call sign and other information. Also has you put in a contact number, so if people are trying to find your field day site, if they want to volunteer to work with you at your site, you can put that information in there, put an email in. That way people can contact you. Just log into your ARRL website with your ARRL account, and then go in and add your site. There's 626
and you'll need
there.
to designate one person who's responsible for managing that listing for your club entry.
Yes. Think about choosing the contest scoreboard if you have internet at your site. If you don't, it's kind of hard to do. Do an after action report. so you can do better next year. So have an after field day meeting to discuss what worked, what did not work, what you can do to make it better.
This is really important, whether it's a field day or any other event or an incident. I keep a notepad with me and make notes as we go along. And if I find something that's causing a problem, I make a note so we can address it either real time before the event's over, or certainly before the next time we head out. And we've made some significant improvements just by compiling these notes from people and figuring out, what little things were bugging them, what could have worked better, and then we fix it.
Another thing is some takeaways. If your group liked the competitive aspect of field day, there's contest every weekend. If they like the operating outside event, there's POTA. So use this to plan other activities for your club throughout the year. I always say it's too bad there's only one field day a year, because some clubs only get on the air during field day. If emergency prep is your thing, there's a bunch of things you can do. So again, see what takeaways you have from your operation, and then adjust your club's activities to match some of those. I also have some resources. I already showed you the antennas. This link will give you a sheet that you can print out. It's in color. It has all the sections listed by the number of the particular call sign. Of course, it may vary. And then it has the abbreviations on this side. When you turn it over on the other side, it has them in alphabetical order by the section name, and it has the abbreviations on them. It also has standard phonetics here, and it has some simple Q codes on this sheet, and you can print these out and have them available at your operation station.
Great resource, Anthony. Thank you. It's 7. Shall we stop for some questions here?
Well, let me just finish this. Two more slides up here. There's also a sections map if you want that, and there's a sample letter to send out to your club members. The youth resources that I showed a little earlier. You can get this link and get all the posters. Everything I showed you in the form of a poster tonight is all available at this link. Information on getting started with HF and VHF, and I'll leave this up while we go to questions, so people can shoot that if they want the QR code or they want to get to the resources now. So let's go ahead and first of all,
Thomas had his hand up for a
yes.
while.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Thank you. My question about the 3 hours is it a chicken or an egg thing? Okay, now it's afterwards. Everybody's gone, so nobody does it. When for years it was frontwards. It was the 3 hours ahead of start. And that meant there were a lot of people setting up, many of whom wanted to try their radios out and wouldn't begrudge you the contest. And an even better change in the rules is a 24-hour station may not take credit for it, but they can work them again during the 24 hours and get credit for it, so that it doesn't hurt them to answer the 3-hour early stations. As an example of one operation we did, we were a 5, okay, we were an A5. We pulled 5 cars in, took the vehicle antenna off the port, slapped a over the tree antenna or something similar on the port, and threw a pup generator on the ground so as not to run the generator for the whole period, not to run the car for the whole period, and rock and rolled. And meanwhile, the rest of the team was setting up the more carefully arranged, elaborate antennas and so forth. It was great practice for responding to a sudden communications failure.
This would be a good thing to suggest to your division director, because they're ultimately the ones that make recommendations on things like rule changes, although it's primarily staff. The directors have some input to that. So that's the kind of thing you might want to suggest through your division director.
And remember, it's only for those of you that are thinking about doing it, you only get to operate extra hours after the 2 p.m., not before the 2 p.m.
He's talking about, maybe changing the rule to make it the
because the earlier rule was before. It was
I know, but that's
until
long ago. That's been gone for quite a while.
Okay, and the other things, appreciate that bit about vehicles as an A station when the antennas are off the car, because that was exactly what we did during those operations. Cable stubs should be capped or use a deliberate shunt at the corrected length. And the reason why you want to do that is it prevents accidental contact with RF, even from a visiting dog. And you burn puppy's nose, you can count on being in court for carelessness. Don't do
Yeah,
that.
with stubs, I usually tape and then shrink wrap the ends, and I use
Great.
different colors for short and open so that it's obvious.
That's a great idea. I really appreciate that one.
Yeah.
Our,
And
our,
remember,
our,
if you are using stubs, just remember that you must, if you change bands, you have to change the stub or you can damage the radio.
Yeah, it's best to put the stub on the antenna side, the output side of any antenna switch you happen to use, so that when you change bands, the new stub is automatically in place.
Thank you. That's another great one. And our logging is networked so that our submitter leaves there with the complete log. I know you said, you can do it the other way, but this way the poor guy doesn't have to chase anybody.
Yeah, that's kind of up to you. If certainly for our when we do contest expeditions overseas, we have everything networked primarily as a safety, so that if one computer goes down, we still have the complete log. And maybe if we have a spare, we leave it on there, and that can be put into any station if necessary. It does add cabling, in between stations, unless you're using a mesh network, and that cabling can pick up RF and bring it into the computer. So, either have toroids available or run some tests ahead of time.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest not using cable, use Wi-Fi, because you don't even need to have an internet connection. You can buy a simple Wi-Fi adapter.
Use a router.
Without internet access, because we do half of our stations. We network our CW stations because we have one station that's the run station and one station that's the search and pound station. So instead of having the run operator get up and move to a different operating station, they can switch bands and know what's already been worked there. So we do partly networking that way, but we don't network the other stations. But yeah, I would suggest going with a simple router type thing. There's a lot of them out there for the gamers use that just very simple. You just connect it with your Wi-Fi, and you don't get any internet access, but you do get peer-to-peer networking.
And the last thing is about the ARRL locator. A number of years in the late 90s, they had a real problem with a couple of, I can't call them anything but gangs. They struck more than 20 field day sites and cleaned them off. If you're on the locator, make sure you've got a watchman overnight, and it shouldn't be a person working alone. It should be at least two people, so that they're not an easy mark for somebody to distract the one and snatch the most valuable radio and run with it. It's just a fact of life. If the thief happens to be familiar, he knows you're going to have thousands of dollars of equipment out there. Well, first of all, don't leave your high dollar actual station out there. Antennas are fine. Very few people will steal those. And a generator well chained may be fine, but don't leave your K3 or something out there, for pity's sake. So just be aware that if you're on a locator, anybody can look you up, and not everybody in the world is well intentioned.
There's a question in chat asking about which software can display the contacted sections on field day. Most of the software have the ability to have multiplier screens, but there are some add-on software that you can use, such as Athena, which will give you real-time statistics. There's also Multi-Chase, which will give you color in each of the states on a map. I find these not very useful for the operator positions because there's no multipliers in field day, so you really don't need to worry about this. But if you're going to be having one extra computer that you're using in a network system to show guests, this might be a very attractive thing. So go to my website, kzt.com, go to operating and go to contesting, and you'll find all this software on the right-hand side here that you can add on to N1MM if you want to track the states that you worked with Multi-Chase, or if you want to just have real-time stats with Athena.
Yeah, showing states worked is a real easy graphic illustration for visitors. We've done that at some preparedness fairs where we maybe have an HF demonstration station, typically a 20-meter dipole and a battery and a radio and some CW. during the California QSO party, we used to have there was a fair there, and I just kept a map and hand colored it as we went, and could show people where we were talking, and it really impressed them.
Another thing you might want for your education table is a way for people to listen to the field day activity. There's a couple ways to do that. You can put a receiver out there, and you don't even need an antenna. You can just put a piece of wire this long, and they'll be able to hear everything that's going on from your stations. But the other thing that's even better is to give them have this handout at your website that I use when I'm working with schools, and that is for the free
ASVRs.
online software-defined radios that people can install on their phone and use for that. So let me find the right, here it is right here. Here's the poster. This poster you can have out. They can shoot this QR code. It'll give them a 5-page set of instructions on how to use WebSDR, Kiwis, and Open Receiver. And they'll be able to tune in stations using this with their phone. This is my grandson using his phone. So this is the kind of thing that having on your education table and your visitors table, they can shoot this QR code, and that gives them the ability to listen on HF, and you can tell them what frequencies to listen on. When you go to this link here that's actually in here, this link that's the poster takes them to will show them the band plan, the links to the software-defined radios, some basic instructions on how to use them, and you can point them to the right bands where you're operating at the time. So again, those are all in the posters that I have available, the resources for these. It's in this Field Days resources for your station. Other questions?
While I get my microphone undone, Gene's had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, go ahead, Gene.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. This is Gene, N3XUS in Clayton, Texas. Two questions quick. How does JS8 call fit into today when it comes
Gene,
to
your audio's breaking up. You might
Yeah.
want to kill your camera if you got a bandwidth issue.
But I think I got his question because I think he was asking, how does JTS software work as opposed to WSJTX? Most people will be using the WSJTX as opposed to the keyboard-to-keyboard software for FT8, FT4. I think that was your question. Is that it, Gene?
I think so. JS8 call
Yeah.
was basically that.
Yeah, I would not use JSA call during field day because the vast majority of the stations are going to be using standard WSJTX.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that.
Mhm.
Next
Well,
one.
By
Can you
the
hear me
way,
better now?
we didn't mention it, but you just reminded me of something. If you want to do those emergency message bonuses using VARA, WinLink is a great way to do that, and you can find those links on the RATPAC site. We've had a number of presentations on those. That's a great way to do your emergency communications bonus points, messages, etc.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Next is like a scenario. I drive my pickup truck out to a public land, would it be a park or whatever, and I set up my radio power supply on a bench or on the ground, but my antenna, let's say a 10-meter hamstick, is mounted to the hood of my vehicle. What kind of class would that be?
That'd be 1B.
1B.
1B, okay.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much, guys.
Because you can't drive around with your stuff on a table.
And there was a question about logging. Someone was asking about doing a simple prototype logging situation with an iPad. If you go to this presentation that I did for RATPAC a couple months ago, tiny.cc log SW. In this, there's a section that goes through and talks about all the different logging programs, and I talk about some specialty programs for POTA. These are the ones I probably would think about using some of these basic proto-logging software.
Very good.
Hammers is probably the most common one. There's another one that's just came out called Lopo, and there's a couple other ones out there if you go to any of the POTA sites and search for POTA logging software. But HAMRS, HAMRS is probably the most common POTA operating tool. But there's other ones out there for like the iPad and for iPhones and Android phones, and you can find that information in this presentation on logging software.
Anthony, real quick question. Do you know
Yes.
whether any of the popular software will run on a Mac?
Yes, I have the Mac software. I just closed that actually. Let me open that back up again.
That's okay. Just
Yes,
to indicate which one, because somebody had a question about
yeah,
it.
Rumlog to go will work on Mac, iPad, and iPhone. And then Rumlog itself works on a Macintosh. So there's two of them. There's the portable version, which is Rumlog to go, and then there's MacLogger DX and Rumlog that work on the Mac.
Thank you. And Tom, W3DTH had a couple of other comments.
Yes, sir. For education stuff, we solicit messages to their out of area contact, and you make a kind of funny intro out of it, never off color, of course, but you say, so who's the greatest talker in your entire family that is nowhere near you? That's the person you want that will love to call everybody else up and gab about how you made it through the problem. And the other thing is we'll send a message to their phone, whatever brand of phone it is, by using the list of carrier email addresses so that they can see how a message would reach a relative at a time when they can't communicate readily, because it'll come right back to their phone while they're standing there.
Very good. Same kind of thing can be done at a disaster preparedness fair or an evacuation drill or something, to remind people that they should have their out-of-state contacts available wherever they are, and also illustrate that we can utilize that to get messages through when other things aren't working. Very good.
Right. And the last one is, we put an invitation out to the scouting community through our regional council, not through the local councils, but the regional council. One scout's parents brought him down from New York to pick up his radio merit badge.
Wow.
Because he really needed it, and he's coming up against the wire. But we had scouts from all over, and it was they can get participation in a disaster exercise out of it, and a couple of others.
If you got enough people, I know that the N6R, which is the Ventura conglomerate of clubs that operate from the Reagan Library, they have had whole, radio merit badge classes during the event, as well as get them on the air with GOTA. So yes, if you got enough people to do it.
Yeah, we set it up so that they get A to Z on the radio merit badge. And we will also sign them off on the emergency exercise one for part of it and things like that. But they walk away qualified for their radio merit badge.
And I have a bunch of scouting information here on my webpage again. So if you need ideas for scouting resources or youth resources, khzt.com, go to the youth section, and there's a bunch of resources there. Other questions? I put the link for the field day resources in the chat.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in chat. I think
I got one question, Marty. Do the
Barry?
do the rules say that it's 100 points for a message to your section manager or to a section manager?
It's to your section manager or section emergency coordinator.
But it does say your. It doesn't.
I believe it does.
Anyone.
Well, by the way, just in case though, guys, remember, you all need to go out and download the official ARRL packet. Everything we talked about tonight, we were paraphrasing a lot of things, so make sure you go to the ARRL website and go and download the full packet of rules and all the information.
Yeah. Then you've got it from the horse's mouth.
Go right here.
In terms of sending those messages, if you have a club member that can't participate physically or whatever and has to stay home, that might be a good designated person to get on at a certain time and receive your message to the section manager. They can take that as long as it leaves your field day site by RF.
Yeah, and it's to your ARRL section manager or emergency coordinator, not just anyone.
We can't send messages to Dan and get points.
You can, but you can use those for your other messages.
You can get 10 points for that.
Yeah.
But not the 100.
Yeah, there's two sets of messages. You get 100 points for sending it to this, and then you get up to 100 points by sending 10 messages for 10
Sending or
points each.
or relaying. Yeah.
Yes. So remember, these two are different.
Right.
Yeah.
It's 200 points. And
Right.
if you're looking to get points,
Yeah.
it can
You know,
make a difference.
I have found that the 10 points per message thing is usually not worth it because the time it takes to do it, you could make 3 or 4 CW contacts, so it's a net loss.
Yeah, if you're going to do it and you want to do it effectively, use VAR or WinLink so you can dump them really quick and go out.
You can send those 10 messages as a book to 10 different
Yes.
addresses.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
So that's a way to do it too.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Anyone that's in Southern Florida, I have a list of 15 people you can use. You want to send messages.
But remember, download the official packet of information because we were paraphrasing and we didn't go into section 7.312.34a, so you're going to need to make sure you read through the whole thing. I just thought of something last night, and there's always people trying to figure out how ways to game the system. I'm not suggesting you do this, but you could actually operate 2 FT8 stations as long as one always stayed on even and another one stayed on odd, and they would only count for 1. But that'll probably be a rule next year that they'll add that you can't do that. But yes, you could do that because it's radios simultaneously. Now you're not allowed to use octopi and other methods of cutting in and out, so I guess that might be considered that. Not in the spirit of the rules.
Everybody's always gaming the system.
I'm not doing it. I've just thought about it.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's why there's a 10 station limit now on the number of transmitters you can get credit for, because the Potomac Valley,
W3AO.
yeah, put 16
32.
stations on the air one year, and
32.
Automatically
32.
Nobody else.
they still have the films up on YouTube about what they did.
Yep. But you know
Okay.
what? They had fun. It worked for them, and it didn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is the score is not the most important part by any means. I can't remember what scores I had in the 38 years, but I can almost tell you one fun thing about each year. Last year was probably the deer that was about 2 feet behind me, staring over my shoulder when my wife was looking at me on the porch of the cabin we were using.
Did they get licensed?
Good thing
Yeah.
it wasn't a moose.
I could have used that for my educational opportunities, but you don't get educational opportunities with a Class B station. So, yes, we had all sorts of wildlife. The skunks were nice enough to stay on the other side of the creek.
All right. Okay, I got to go. Thank you, everybody.
Anthony, I sent you a text to correct the name of the software.
Oh, yes. I will take care of that. Anyone else? Any other questions?
Yeah, if anybody else has used a pup generator that produces 12 volts for field day power, please get in touch. I'd like to talk to anybody who's done
Okay.
that. My call sign at the league address works for me. I don't know why mine still does, but it does.
I don't know. That's something I'm not familiar with. So anyone else that has information on that, let Tom know. By the way, because there was no RATPAC last week, you have homework. If you go to the RATPAC Facebook site, you'll find links to the Dayton Hamvention forums, which are all recorded you can watch. Over 1/4 of the Contest University forums that you can watch, and all the forums from 4 days in May. So I've now assigned you about 36 hours of video to watch. So go forth and watch video.
Okay. Now
you
we
all.
go. Okay, are there any more questions, answers, comments?
Complaints. Dan's available now for complaints.
Well, I'm gonna pull
Here's
a
my
plug.
non-complaint. Thank you very much, guys. This was very helpful. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All righty. With that, I'm going to pull the plug, say 73s, and hopefully see you guys next week.